All right, so the Colts practice report looking pretty good right now going into this week in terms of people that maybe were questionable coming into the week and their likelihood to play. Of course, Josh Downs, a full practice today being Thursday, and presumably going to pass the concussion protocol. Most of the time a guy gets a concussion, usually they're guaranteed to miss 1 week, but also just as much so, barring they've had multiple in a short period of time, are kind of guaranteed to play that second week following the concussion, right? So for Josh Downs, we like that. Ashton Doolin practice in full. Samson Ebukam, we know, is week to week. Tyler Goodson been dealing with the groin. Tyler Groinson, he now has 2 straight full practices in a row, but you do kind of wonder where he falls right now within this roster because Amir Abdullah has been super, super impactful for this team. And you kind of wonder, okay, if it's between him and Goodson, like, is Abdullah the guy that you want to roll with? If you're asking me, quite possibly, because he can also play special teams, but that'll be an interesting decision for the Indianapolis Colts. Tyquan Lewis has not practiced 2 straight days. The Colts consider him day-to-day. Kenny Moore practicing, Braden Smith practicing, and then Jaylon Jones returning to practice is really the big news for the Indianapolis Colts this week. Welcome news for the Indianapolis Colts, but I don't just want you to see the headline that he's back at practice and jump to conclusions. Let's just be clear about what Jaylon Jones practicing means. The Colts have opened up the 21-day window for Jaylon Jones, which is a designation specific to players that are on the IR. It means that the team has 21 days to evaluate whether or not he comes back and plays for them or stays on IR for the remainder of the season. Now, obviously, to open that window, you would have to believe that he's going to be ready to work his way back within that 21 days. Kind of the same way in reverse how the Colts, when Kenny Moore hurt his Achilles, everyone was calling for IR, and the Colts opted against it because they felt he was going to be able to play inside of the window that the IR would hold you out for, which is a minimum of 4 games, and did, of course, end up coming to fruition like they expected. This decision indicates that the Colts do expect Jaylon Jones to be healthy soon, but what it does not mean is that he's back quite yet. This is very much a wait-and-see type of game for the Indianapolis Colts with Jaylon Jones. It could be this week, but it doesn't have to be, especially given the fact that they are versing the Titans. We know how awful they've been, but even more importantly, we know that this hamstring injury of Jaylon Jones has been lingering since OTAs, right? He tweaked it, then he came back, he tweaked it again, and then put him on IR. So again, this is going to be wait and see. The Colts are going to make sure that they are absolutely certain before bringing him back into game action. The hamstring, for whatever reason, I don't know the science behind it, is like notoriously pesky of an injury. Like, it just lingers. I don't know if you've ever pulled a hamstring before, but like, just when you feel like it's good, you start running and then bang, something happens and you're right back in the same situation you were in. But with all of that said, it should be encouraging to know that the Colts are going to be careful, because you're also going to know that once he's out there, you can rest assured that he's going to be healthy. But of course, him practicing is a very small part of the conversation around Jaylon Jones. The real conversation surrounds what he's going to bring to this room once he's back, and if he's going to lift the room up, and if he does, how much. And I have seen Zach Hicks take on this, the great Zach Hicks. And let me preface this by saying Zach Hicks is a friend of the show. He's been on a few times. One of my favorite things about him is not just that he covers the Colts, right? Obviously, we love that side of things, but that he's a football guy through and through. Like, I know he watches the film. I know he knows his stuff. And, by the way, I assume you know who Zach Hicks is, right? Like, if you know this show, Zach Hicks obviously has his own page where he watches the film. He's on Locked On Colts, so go ahead. Obviously, give them a follow, watch what they're doing, because if you're looking for news in a timely fashion, they're probably your people, as opposed to me, who's I kind of consider myself more of a commentary on these things, not so much the timely guy, right? But nonetheless, I don't say all that stuff about Zach Hicks to kind of prop myself up or add credibility, right? I do it to make sure you know that what I'm doing right now isn't a hit piece. Like, I'm really just bringing him up specifically to kind of speak to a point of view that I know a lot of you have heard and potentially a lot of you agree with. And I've heard him allude to the fact that he is not certain how Jaylon Jones fits into the scheme. I know certainly he was saying it kind of at the start of training camp, right? He isn't certain now where Jaylon Jones ends up on this depth chart when he comes back. Like, are we sure he's ahead of Mekhi Blackman when all is said and done? He's not so sure. I personally disagree with this, respectfully, of course, but really, really disagree with this. We'll talk about how I feel about Jaylon Jones' return and why I'm so optimistic about his ability to contribute, despite the fact that he's not a scheme fit. Then from there, we'll go on. We'll answer some of your questions that you guys asked for me. I put up a post. A number of you guys asked questions. I'll get to as many of them as I feel like I could fit into this episode, and maybe some of them I just think are too big of a topic. I want them to be their own episode, right? But after that, we'll go on with our merry day. And you know what it is? I got to introduce the show. My name is Justin. This right here is the Ride on the Bench Colts podcast. As always, ask anyone watching and enjoying the show. Go ahead, shoot a like. It's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Of course, subscribe if you want to be a part of the journey. We hit 4,000 subscribers over here. Finally, how long have I been asking for it? Thank you guys so much. So now we're on the quest to 5,000. Keep coming back, enjoying the show. Or rather, if you keep coming back and enjoying the show, or maybe it's your first day here and you're enjoying what you're hearing, hit that subscribe button. Never miss an episode again, and start this very long and grueling climb it's going to be to get to 5,000. And then, of course, audio listeners, leave a five-star review. Let the people know how much you're enjoying what it is that we're doing over here. Most importantly, be civil in the comment section. You don't know what the person on the other end of the keyboard is going through today. If you disagree, totally fine, but take it as an opportunity to have a discussion, make a friend. We're all rooting for the same thing. And it's the Indianapolis Colts. Now, back to business, and obviously we're talking about Jaylon Jones in case you missed the whole beginning of the show. And one thing I want to get off the, I guess right off the bat, something I feel I need to establish, I should disclose this. One, I'm a Jaylon Jones guy. I've always been a Jaylon Jones guy. And a year ago, I kind of felt like people were dogging him a little bit. And now all of a sudden, a lot of the same people may be excited for his return. I would just like to point out that I've consistently been a fan of Jaylon Jones from day one. Like, I've always thought he looked good out there on the field, particularly given the fact when you think about it, 7th-round pick, he comes in, he claims a starting role. I mean, you can't be a bad football player for that to happen. Like, he didn't have any advantages when he was drafted by the Indianapolis Colts, and I've always thought he produced well on the field. Not perfect, but definitely far more than you should have expected from him. And then two, and this more so speaks to the scheme fit point, and really is my larger point here, and why I think you should be optimistic about him coming back and making an impact for this team. I'm not always of the belief that scheme matters as much as people think it does when it comes to a player's ability to perform. Like, I think sometimes people will overthink something, like they almost know too much for their own good. So they'll end up like, just because they know something schematically and what a coach wants to do, and maybe the types of players that have been successful for said coach before. Of course, in this case, we're talking about Lou Anarumo, and maybe even the types of skill sets that they know fit into what he's asking of a defender. Just because you know all of those things, and just because all of those things are true, it doesn't inherently mean that just because a player doesn't fall lockstep with what those things are, that they can't find success. I tend to be much more on the side of football players can play football. And if a guy can play, a guy can play. And he'll make it work more often than not, particularly if he's at a point in his career that lends well for his ability to adjust. I think Jaylon Jones is there when you take into account the fact that he is young, and then in that athletically is still at his peak. We know a lot of the times corners later on in their career, as they get 30, 31, 32, that's when you get into a spot where you really can't teach an old dog new tricks. And then, of course, athletically, guys start to diminish, and the position in of itself is such a reactive one, so you really can't fall behind athletically. It's one of those things we saw with Xavier Howard earlier in the year, and clearly he saw it as well because he retired. So when I talk about scheme and what a coach likes as it applies to Lou Anarumo, he's generally speaking the type of guy that is going to want speed in his corners over something like size, right? Like, I think you really have two schools of thought. Some people like guys that are physical at the cornerback position. Think about Gus Bradley back in the day. Well, Gus Bradley really with us last year, but you think back to the Seahawks when Gus Bradley was doing his thing with guys like Brandon Browner and Richard Sherman. Those guys were all about physicality and length more so than they were their speed. Lou Anarumo is going to want a guy who's fast enough to keep up in man coverage, perhaps a little bit versatile if he wants to move guys around. Maybe he wants to move them inside, move them outside, maybe even, Lord knows what Lou Anarumo is going to do with a player at any given moment, right? You would look at all of those things on the surface, you would say, well, okay, maybe Jones doesn't fit that, but then you do have to kind of think a little bit more about it, right? And say, well, at the same time, he was a guy who advocated to go get Mooney Ward, and Mooney Ward is not a guy that's known for his speed. He's not known for his versatility. He's an outside corner who's physical, who makes it tough at the line of scrimmage, and is going to make it tough for a receiver to get that first step, right? He's going to get his hands on you off the ball and make sure that you don't just have smooth sailing out there. And then, of course, he has great ball skills and experience and all of this stuff. These are all things that Charvarius Ward does well. But my point being is he's a guy that Lou said we need to go get him, and he doesn't fit Lou's preferred skill set per se, but he's a football player that can play football, right? And ultimately, that's what you're looking for. Jaylon Jones, while no Mooney Ward, fits much of that same exact skill set. He does the same things. He's ultra competitive. He's physical at the line of scrimmage. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. He's still improving and is really a serial overachiever at the position. Again, 7th-round pick. No one expected anything of him. And the Colts went on and drafted him there. And man, he just made a great impact when he's on the field. He has a lot of reps as a starter in this league, a lot of real good ones too, and real important games, right? So you're not going to catch a moment that's too big for Jaylon Jones. Like, he just isn't that guy. Like, will he blow coverages at times? Sure. Most corners will if they're not Charvarius Ward, if they're not Pat Surtain, right? Like, there's only so many of those guys in this league. I think Jaylon Jones, when deemed healthy enough, is going to come in and help this team tremendously. And I think implying anything else, implying that perhaps he won't be successful. Like, I mean, you have to think again, the idea that he was able to come in and play as good as he did with no expectation, to then have watched that and then come here and look and say, oh, well, maybe he's not as fast as what Lou wants. And you know, maybe it's just not going to be a scheme fit. I think, in my opinion, that's a case of knowing too much for your own good. I think it's overthinking it. I think you have a guy in Jaylon Jones who they're going to appreciate his physicality, and he's going to go out there, and the moment he's healthy enough, he's going to be on the field as much as humanly possible, right? I think that's kind of where we're at with Jaylon Jones. And really, his health, if he's able to stay healthy, is going to set us up for something that I've alluded to in previous episodes where, you know, obviously you have him getting back onto the field soon, even if not this week coming up. Kenny Moore just got back onto the field. If he can stay healthy, we know Mooney Ward is on IR, but when he comes off, you're going to have about a month or a month and a half of action where this Colts secondary, for the first time of the season, and we're not even going to know what their record is at that point, presumably it's going to be pretty good, they're going to get healthy at the right time because now you're going to have Jaylon Jones, Kenny Moore, and Mooney Ward all on the field just in time to get a little bit of continuity for a potential playoff run and a potential run towards something even greater than that. And then you're going to have guys like Mekhi Blackman, like Jonathan Edwards, who are going to have been better for having had to have been in the mix while those guys were dealing with injuries. And then really what's going to happen is that the Colts defense is going to be playing their best football late in the season, or at least theoretically, that's what this would lead you to believe. So that's kind of why I'm optimistic about where the Colts are headed defensively as the season goes on. And I do really think, given the circumstance, if we're to be fair to them, they haven't really even been a bad defense. Like, the Colts have situationally been a pretty solid defense. I just think the offense has been so good that the defense does look a little bit weak by comparison. But I think as the season goes on, Jaylon Jones being a part of it, I think those things are going to slowly go into the back seat. And I think you're going to see the Colts continue to prove that they're a force here. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, I will do two things. One, I will get a sip of water. And then two, we'll start answering some of your questions. And for the nature of making this off the cuff, I don't have any notes about these questions. I might have a page or two pulled up regarding certain things, but overall, I'm going to try to just make sure to get right through these. So, question number one, Wrench Fed Patriot asks, Patriot with a Colts logo, by the way, is crazy work, but that's neither here nor there. He says, do we extend Alec Pierce at the end of the season? And I think this question is one that's being misconstrued by a lot of fans, right? I don't think it's so much about whether or not the Colts extend Alec Pierce. I think it's far much more about whether Alec Pierce extends with the Colts, right? I think at a certain point, when you look at it right now, I think Alec Pierce would like to see this season out. And I think in the offseason, when you have guys, right, like Tyler Warren, Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, obviously Adonai Mitchell is someone who's in the doghouse right now, but you don't know what his trajectory is going to be. Alec Pierce may look at another team and just say, hey, you know, from my personal long-term career goals, yeah, of course we want to win, but also I want to show that I'm a little bit more than how I've been used. And he would be right to feel that way. So I think that's going to be the big thing with Alec Pierce. I think if he's gone, it's not going to be because the Colts didn't want him back, right? I think a lot of people, if it happens, you should prep for this. Here's a story before a story. Watch the fans get on Chris Ballard for that. It's going to be far more about Alec Pierce and his personal goals than it is going to be about whether the Colts want him. That's my personal opinion. Next up, Malicious Music, YT2658. You asked 4 questions, brother. I think that's cheating, so I'm only going to answer one of them, and I'll answer the first one. And he asks, how likely do you think it is that Jones would take a big 5 to 6 year deal over an inflated 4-year deal to allow pieces around him to be paid, seeing as he already had one big contract with the Giants? That's an interesting question. Obviously, I've never spoken to Daniel Jones in my life. I would love to at some point. So I can't speak to him. What I will say is this. One of the things that sticks out to me most about Daniel Jones when they ask him what he likes about playing for the Indianapolis Colts and when he's spoken to that idea is that he appreciates the fact that these guys are all about football over here. And I think he likes the fact that it's a small market. I think he really likes working with Shane Steichen. And I think Daniel Jones is smart enough to understand that while he's playing spectacular, so much of it is about what the pieces are around him right now, just as much as it is his play, right? So do I think he would be willing to short himself a few dollars ultimately to make sure that he can stay in a situation where he finds a lot of success and a fan base that is embracing him and he could be successful going into the future? Yes. But do I think at the same time that he would short himself significantly? No, probably not. And no, I don't think he should at that point. I have a feeling that assuming this season plays out as it looks like it might play out, Daniel Jones and the Colts will be just fine. They will be married at the hip moving forward. I think this is how it's going to be. I think Daniel Jones ends up re-signing a multi-year deal that brings him well into his 30s with the Indianapolis Colts. That's my prediction on how that's going to go. Next up, Jackson Gizzle. Sorry if I mispronounced that. 9476. Thoughts on A.D. Mitchell? Does he get out of the doghouse soon, or is he going to be at the bottom of the wide receiver room for the rest of the year? Good question, because I think really what I like about that question is that you distinguish the fact, right? Doghouse versus just this season, or versus I don't even know how to speak English. Basically, what you're saying, when you talk about the doghouse, you're just talking about this season, it seems, right? You're not making a statement about the long-term prospects with the team. Do I think he gets out of the doghouse soon? No, I don't. Primarily because so much that's on the line right now for the Indianapolis Colts and just how much they have ahead of him, right? Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, and Ashton Doolin. I don't really think there's even a need to thrust A.D. Mitchell into anything more than what he's got. Do I think he has an opportunity to get out of the doghouse? Yes, he do. I think he will. And I do think his presence plays a little bit into Alec Pierce this offseason. I know before I said, yes, it's going to be more so about whether or not Alec Pierce wants to extend with the Colts. But I think when you talk about getting top flight wide receiver money, like the top of the pay band for Alec Pierce, I think a guy like A.D. Mitchell proving himself to the Colts kind of in the practice field and in the facility will kind of, and this will be the stuff people don't see. So when it happens, people are, of course, going to freak out the same way they were, once upon a time, everyone was against Alec Pierce and everyone flipped. People will have the same short-term memory. So I think that A.D. Mitchell, he can kind of prove himself as part of the future of this team in his actions moving forward here, and we'll see how that goes. Alex Smith, 3459, says, do you think we will ever get flexed to more primetime games this year? Good question. The thing about getting flexed to primetime games is that it's not so much only about kind of whether or not you should be in primetime, but it's also about whether or not another game should not be in primetime, right? So if I'm to look at the schedule kind of down the stretch, I would say one game or 1 week where you have the potential for this is maybe week 12, where the Colts right now are slated to verse the Chiefs at 1 o'clock. But on Monday Night Football, it's the Carolina Panthers and the San Francisco 49ers. I don't know when people have flexed games in the past, the NFL that is, if it's only been on the same day. Like, I don't know if you get flexed from daytime Sunday to primetime Monday, or if that's specifically a Sunday night to Sunday during the day type of thing. But that's an option right there. I think the Colts could potentially get flexed onto Monday, November 24th on Monday Night Football. And then other than that, I just have the schedule here. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, they're versus the Seahawks at 4:25 in Week 15. The Monday night game is the Dolphins versus the Steelers. Can I see the Colts maybe getting flexed to Monday night then if that's an option? Sure. But to answer your question, no, I don't exactly see them getting flexed into prime time in any situations that they're not in there for right now. That's my personal opinion on the matter. I'm trying to look through it just in real time to see. No, I don't think the Colts will get flexed, most likely. But if they do, it'll be onto one of those Monday Night Football games that I said. Next question. Kip Sims, 1445. Thoughts on what happens with Anthony Richardson at the end of the season? It's a hell of a question, right? That is a hell of a question. There's no doubt about it right now that if you're the Colts, this guy cannot be trusted, and not as a character thing. Like, I think he's a good dude, but I'm talking about what he's shown between the play, between the fact that his injury. I mean, can you imagine pregame to be using a resistance band and it snap into your face and damage you so bad that you have to go on IR? Some people are just an accident waiting to happen. Anthony Richardson kind of proving to be one of those guys. And really the question is going to become, if Daniel Jones is your long-term solution at quarterback, I know they said they haven't given up on him, but do you feel like the offense flows seamlessly from Daniel Jones to Anthony Richardson in the case that Daniel Jones goes down? I just don't know about that, to be 100% honest with you. So do I think that the Colts end up trading Richardson this offseason? I think you're looking at about a 50-50 shot of that happening right now, primarily because any reason to hold on to him would have to do with developing him for the future. But right now, Daniel Jones seems to be your franchise quarterback. And when I say seems to be your franchise quarterback, I know for a fact he is. And you could say you don't have evidence. I have all the evidence I can need by watching him play. So, yeah, I do think that there's a pretty good chance Richardson gets traded during the offseason to whatever, but what they get for him, I mean, I have not a clue, right? I mean, you'd be lucky to get a 7th-round pick and a bag of chips for Anthony Richardson right now, so it seems. Next question by Jonathan Reeves, 3569. What's our cap situation, and are we able to add on the defensive side of the ball before the trade deadlines? Are the rumors of adding either Crosby or Hendrickson realistic? Crosby, probably not, but a man can dream, right? As far as the cap situation for the Colts as it currently stands, they're ranked 27th in the league in available space. So everyone who says bargain bin Ballard, he's out there spending money, right? And not for anything, the Colts have consistently kind of been in the middle of the pack on that front. They've only got $5 million left, $5.1 million to be precise. But that being said, that does include some of the contracts that are coming off the books at the end of the year. And when you think about edge rushers, you do have guys like Kwity Paye, like Samson Ebukam, who we know is week to week right now and may not be good timing on the trade department because the deadline is coming up on, I believe, November 4th. But if Kwity Paye was to be involved in a trade for an edge rusher, so let's say you wanted to go get a Trey Hendrickson, hypothetically speaking, and you included Kwity Paye in the deal, that plus some restructuring, teams always find a way to get that done, right? Maybe you backload, you rework a contract to make it where a guy's kind of deferring some of his guaranteed money, something like that. Teams always find a way to get it done. So do I think it's realistic? Yes. But the question becomes, what are they more likely to trade for? A corner or an edge? And quite frankly, your guess is as good as mine. I do think if you added a Trey Hendrickson to this room, it is kind of interesting as a rental, because if I'm not mistaken, let me look it up real quick. I don't even think Trey Hendrickson is on the books after this year. So I think if you're saying, okay, we're looking at this right now as a potential, if you're the Colts, by the way, you have to think this way. Can we win the Super Bowl this year, right? And if that comes down to saying, oh, right, well, whether it's Kwity Paye or Trey Hendrickson, we don't even know if we're going to have him after this season, and we're just looking at them for this year, of course you would want Trey Hendrickson instead. So that's kind of a part of it. But let me just make sure that I'm right on the details of his contract before I speak that into existence. I think I am. Yeah, he is on the books just for this year, and that's it. So, yeah, I do think a trade for him is realistic from the sense that even if it's not about the long-term future with the team, if you can make it happen and you're just upgrading pay to him for the season, I think if you're the Colts, you probably do that if you don't have to give up too much, right? And the Bengals don't really have all that much leverage in that trade because everyone and their mother knows that that Trey Hendrickson is someone that's on the move potentially for that team, right? Next question's about Chris Ballard. We're going to save that for an episode. I keep teasing that, but I just want to make sure the case is thorough when I finally make it. Colts fan 9959 says, what are your thoughts on the back end of the schedule starting with the Chiefs? Love it. Love it. I love the fact that the Colts kind of have this buffer going into the bye, and then really when you get closer to playoff time, when you get to the back end of the season, right? We keep in mind we have not versed the Texans or the Jaguars once yet, and that has massive implications on this division. But man, versing those teams 4 times after the bye week, versing the Chiefs, versing the Seahawks, these types of games, these are going to make sure that if the Colts come out of that, even if they lose some of them, as long as they're close and competitive, these types of games are the games that you're going to want headed into the playoffs. They're going to be battle tested when that time comes. So I love that the back end of the schedule starts with the Chiefs, because I think we're going to learn a lot about the Colts. And I think we're going to learn that they're just as good as advertised right now, because they really surprised me this week against the Chargers. I thought the Colts could win. I thought the Colts could lose. And I thought that was going to be a close game. And as it turns out, only some of that was true. The Colts could win. And apparently they couldn't lose. And it wasn't close. Like, the Colts absolutely beat the shit out of the Chargers in that game. So they kind of proved they were even better than I thought. So I'm going to start removing some doubt, any doubt that I have about this team, because they give me no reason to feel that way. I mean, I'm high on all of the pieces. I'm high on Daniel Jones. I'm high on Shane Steichen. I never wasn't high on Shane Steichen, right? So for me, I like that. I like that the back end of the schedule is tough, because it prepares them for the playoffs when that time comes. And then, final question, Pounds, 2020. This is a great question, by the way. Are you concerned about Daniel Jones in the playoffs? I've noticed a trend the last couple of years with quarterbacks reviving their careers, and the playoffs comes around and they stink. Look at Darnold, look at Geno, look at Baker Mayfield. Not much playoff success out of those guys. I'm scared the Colts will have a similar issue. Loving DJ right now, though. Be concerned not about Daniel Jones, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I will just perhaps correct you on Baker. I suppose the terms are subjective, but Baker has been pretty damn good in the playoffs, all things considered. He's 2-3. I believe he gave the business to the Eagles one year. He was in a real close game against the Chiefs in a loss, and another year he's thrown over 300 times and 300 yards a number of times in the playoffs. So Baker, I think, maybe doesn't fall into that bunch, but yes, you're correct. Guys like Sam Darnold, guys like Geno Smith. Sam Darnold, he was amazing for the Vikings last year for a large part of the season. Although if you watched, you would see that he does always, it's part of who he is as a quarterback, is that he's going to make some boneheaded decisions throwing the football, right? Like, that's part of who Sam Darnold is as a football player. And he went into the playoffs and he shit himself like an old man with dementia at a retirement home, right? Like, he lost a payday from the Vikings in one play. That being said, he is good enough to be the quarterback for a winning football team. I think the distinction between him and between Daniel Jones is really that Daniel Jones, any turnover issues he has had in his career were largely due to fumbling issues. And I think a lot of that had to do with him kind of being punch drunk, just getting beat up behind the Lions' offensive line, or the Giants' offensive line, rather. But I think with the Colts, you've seen situations a number of times where you look and say, man, in the past, he would have fumbled that. He would have done something stupid. And he just doesn't do it. So my concerns with Daniel Jones have never been him turning it over through the air. And I think ultimately that's the biggest problem you have to worry about. It's more so fumbling, and he's been great on that front. So no, I'm not worried about Daniel Jones, because I think when you talk about him being prepared, you know he's going to be prepared. When you talk about him being accurate and precise, you know he's going to do that. You know he's going to be able, despite what people tell you, you know he's going to be able to make the throws down the football field. Daniel Jones can make every throw in the book, and he's never been the type of guy who puts the ball in a lot of danger with any consistency through the air. It's not to say he won't throw an interception at any point at an inopportune time. It's the NFL, and that's how it goes. We've seen Peyton Manning throw 6 interceptions in a game. We've seen him throw an interception to Tracy Porter. So these things happen. But am I concerned with DJ overall in the playoffs? Absolutely not. And then as far as Geno Smith, yeah, I mean, he stinks, and he's also in his mid-30s. Geno Smith about cooked, in my opinion, if you ask me. So those are answering some of your questions. I appreciate you guys asking them, because it added an entire segment to the show. So that right there was an episode. This right here was the Ride on the Bench Colts podcast. Like, subscribe if you have not yet. And as always, go Colts.